Hello and welcome to Late Night Talking. It is late at night. I am filming. Sometimes you get a little bit of chaotic energy, but this time I'm going to talk about my goals, my dreams, my hopes, my checklists for 2024. So what I like to do is imagine goals as aspirations. I am a person with ADHD. My mind goes every which way, but I like to imagine that I'm going to read all of these things, and I find that checking off things is one of the best ways to keep me on track. So what I do every year is I create a checklist that is monthly, and then I also create a yearly 100 books, hoping that I'm going to read 100 books of random things that I'm interested in, so as I read along, I can check them off and feel successful. And I check in as I go, and if I don't complete these books, I don't complete these books, but it is nice to keep track of them and to kind of see how I am wandering with my reading. Considering how much I love Canadian literature, I don't know why it has not been on my list of monthly checks every year, because back in 2020, I think it was, I realized that I had barely read any Canadian literature, and I was like, why? I'm Canadian, I feel so full and so alive and so wonderful when I read Canadian literature. As that has gone on, I have read more and more Canadian literature, but this year it is going to be a monthly thing. I'm hopefully going to read one every single month. One of my favorite things to do is read classics. I feel very at home in classics. I really love learning about history and the ways in which people's lives have been lived throughout the years. And I think that classic literature is such an interesting and amazing way to step into history and to understand things through fiction, through themes, through stories. And I love analyzing it. Everyone who says I hate books because I read them in English class, I go, I wish I could understand you. I don't wish I could understand you because I love English class so much. One of the most amazing things about reading classics is that after you read it, there's like tons of stacks of essays and criticism and themes lists about this, and it's so wonderful to feel like I'm in conversation with generations of people in the past, whether the book came out in the 90s or the book came out in 1200. Who knows? But it's really cool to hear people talk about it, and I love that. So I have two for this list. I have a 20th century classic. I love reading 20th century classic. It's by far the easiest because, you know, it's the time of our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and not way back. So I find that this is really interesting. I love reading it, and I'm also trying to complete a goal of reading a book that is published every single year of the 20th century. I have 18 more books to go, and I don't think I'll be done in 2024, but I would like to make some headway in that. I also have a pre-1900 book. It could be Shakespeare, it could be 1700s, any various things. I love reading books, and I want to pressure myself to not only read 20th century classics. This is the very first year I read a bunch of Victorian classics, and before that, pretty much all my classic literature had the majority being in the 20th century. So I am loving that. My next goal groups together two large mediums of writing. We have the short story and poetry. I love short story collections. I love reading them, and I really love poetry as well. And they're both more shorter form, and both of them can be read individually or as a collection. I did that whole entry part, but in my previous years I've done play or short story and had poetry as a second genre. But I think because I have often been overwhelmed, I'm gonna group all three of them together. So I'm adjusting things as I'm talking. Poetry is anything in verse, and it can be really interesting and wonderful to read, and I love reading it. I love writing poetry as well, even though I'm not sure that I'm that good. I love short stories, and I actually write those as well, but also mediocre. One of my hopes and dreams for 2024 is to follow the writing advice of like reading a short story a week and like diving in and thinking about it and then writing a short story. I have not done that. We are in the second week, but we can hope, we can dream. So yes, we have short stories, we have poetry, and we also have plays. I'm grouping all of these together because I think that these are all short form things that I love. I love plays. I think that they're brilliant. I read a bunch of them, and I hope to read more of them in 2024. Another section that has been missing from my checklist that I really wanted to remedy this year is a graphic novel or science fiction fantasy novel. The graphic novel does not need to be science fiction or fantasy, but I wanted to read more of both of these genres, so I put them together. I really love graphic novels. I really love comics. I really love especially DC comics, and I also love independent comics. And then I really love science fiction. I have read 2 fantasy novels so far, so we are down for that. The reason that I put these together is because I think I'm very interested in graphic novels. I'm very interested in science fiction, and sometimes I deprioritize them, and this allows me to prioritize them because I need to check it off every month. The next check on this is a nonfiction book. I really love reading nonfiction, and I think it's really important. I tend to read a fair bit of nonfiction. I read 15 this year, and I think that was one of my lowest ever. But I definitely want to remind myself and check them off when I have. And then the last one, which is going to be the hardest and most difficult of all, is an owned book. I am surrounded by these beautiful, wonderful, glorious bookshelves. Do I read off them? Not often. I like to view my books as a life's library, books that I can pick up and enjoy whenever I want and other people can borrow. The issue is I love a library and use a library recklessly, absurdly, all of those things. I have thought about putting like things on myself, tariffs on myself so that I won't read all of these. I don't know. If I say that like every time I read like 3 unowned books, then I have to read a physical book, am I going to hate myself? Probably. Do I want to hate my reading life? Not really. It's hard. This also kind of hopefully goes into reading physically. I love reading physically. I am dyslexic. I read at a snail's pace. I probably read a page every 3 minutes. And part of that is my dyslexia. And part of that is like, I love to annotate. I annotate the world. And if I don't annotate like physically on it, it's worse. I'm pulling out a notebook or a phone to like write my notes on excessively. Like I love to annotate and it's one of my biggest parts of love. So I would never want to not annotate because I think that it's so beautiful and wonderful. But if I annotated to the degree that I want to annotate every single book, I would never finish a book. Like I get so obsessed with all the little details. Again, I love English class. It's wonderful. But there's some issues in my heart. So yes, the big part of it is slow reading. Big part of it is all the underlining and note taking that I often don't even look at because it's so overwhelming. Like I have I think 20 pages maybe for Rebecca, one of my favorite novels. Have I ever looked at it? No, it's too long. I'm hoping that 55-year-old me will love having all of those notes when I reread these books, but right now I tend to read a lot of audiobooks because it's helpful because then I get to write notes down as I find them and also continue to listen as I make notes. It's a wonderful corresponding. There were so many tangents there and we know it's late at night, so we're going to be okay with that. So now we get to 100 books and I'm going to try to do this faster. So the first one is 25 classics. 3 of these are going to be international classics. Then we have 20 Canadian novels. I love my Canada. I want to represent her on the world stage. And then we have 10 nonfiction books. We have 5 middle grade novels. I love middle grade novels. I think that they are wonderful and epic and I will hopefully read more than 5, but 5 works here. And then 5 picture books. As I said, we love children's books here. We support children's books. We think that picture books should be counted toward your goal. And I said all of that in third person. Whenever my friends are like, no, not reading this book, it's not too long. And I go, no, this is valuable. Then we have 3 translated books. This can coexist with the 3 classics that are translated, or it can be 3 other random books. Who knows? Hopefully I'll read more than 3 translated books. But again, a beginning. We have 10 graphic novels. This has never taken up this big of a chunk, but I love graphic novels. I really, really deprioritize them. So I put 10 in there so that I get it down. 5 science fiction and 5 fantasy. I wanted to separate these out because I love fantasy and I love science fiction and they do different things. When I do prioritize books, they tend to be fantasy and not science fiction. And then we have 3 plays. I really hope that some of these are George Bernard Shaw. Hopefully one of them is Oscar Wilde. At least one of them Ibsen. And then we'll go further. And then we have 5 poetry collections as well as 4 books published before 1800. This can be from 1799. I love some of the late 1700s during the time before Jane Austen. I find it really fascinating. This could be Shakespeare or Christopher Marlowe or ancient Greek plays. It could be any of those things. And then we have 2 non-book numbered things that I would like to do. The first one is to participate in book prizes. I have really, really enjoyed being book prizes. I love the Giller Prize, is the Canadian Grand Prize. We have the Booker Prize, we have the Carol Shield Prize, and then we also have the Women's Prize, which is an international prize that celebrates women throughout the world, which is really cool. We have finished 100 years in books. As I said, I'm trying to read a book from every single year of the 20th century. Will I do this year? Who knows? I can attempt. I do not have this on there for some reason. I must have forgotten it, but it is to read a book from 6 continents. And I'm not reading a book from Antarctica. I don't like ice, and there's not a native people group to talk about it there, so I'm not going to read about the scientists. My asterisk on Europe and North America is that I do not count the US and Canada when I'm talking about North America, and I do not count the UK when I'm talking about Europe. Those are countries which I will always read lots from, so it's no point in counting it in a prize that is trying to get me to read wider. So I would love to know some of your goals. Do you like number goals? Do you find them intimidating? Do you like checking off things? Tell me about all of your things. What is a goal in 2023 that you failed at? What is a goal in 2024 that you hope to do? Should I change my goals? I don't know. Let me know. I would love to hear from you. I love comments. They make me happy. And I will see you next time.